Hello, friends. First, I'd like to acknowledge our collective suffering, as we've mentioned that, and I've observed myself complaining a bit, but a collective suffering that's present over these fast few years. Um, we had the pandemic in higher education. We were just speaking today at a conference about the dramatic effect that the pandemic had on students and college students, and how they have suffered in many ways. And then there's the very real threat that climate change poses to our planet and to our descendants. There's increasing social injustice and turmoil politically in the West, and the insanity of war to our east and a couple of other directions as well. Lots of distractions inviting us to turn away from things as they are. Harder and harder to accept as real. So it may be hard to practice at this moment in time. So, okay, find a comfortable position, close your eyes or leave them open in a general downward gaze. Take a deep breath in and out, and another breath in and out. And at your own pace, take one more breath and then let go on the exhale of all of the tension, excitement, and busyness of the day. Relax your forehead, your jaw, your neck, and shoulders. Choose an anchor, maybe your breath or the sounds around you, and stay with that anchor, allowing thoughts and feelings to come and go like waves on the ocean. Be aware of your thoughts and feelings without judging them, returning to your anchor when they pass through your awareness. Continue to focus on your breath and or the sounds around you for a moment, and when you're pulled away by thoughts, feelings, or body sensations, recognize them without judgment and allow them to be. And then return to your anchor and to the present moment. Loud, huh? So I invite you to join me in a brief state check-in. There's only three of us. By offering your preferred name and noting in a word or two, or a few, what's rising in your experience as you joined this meeting, or as you using the there is social noting format. And I'll start and model that for you. So this is Michael, and there is affection, there is tiredness and anticipation, and there is joy. So whoever wants to jump in.
This is Jim. There's a little pain. There's some nervous tics, and there's a whole lot of excitement.
This is Jake. There is contentment, anticipation, and anxiety, but just a little.
And this is Andrea. There's gratitude, joy, and excitement.
Thank you. Before I begin the teaching, I wanted to loop back to a question about our relationship to thoughts that a previous student asked. Ed, I think maybe Andrea met Ed. This is a question that I think at least some of you had in mind or on the tip of your tongue. One that I answered poorly the first time that Ed asked, and that question is, if we are not our thoughts, then what are we? So I imagine Ed is really well known for asking the elephant in the room kind of questions. He's a retired professor. So what I did the first time was I did wrong. I heard the question from my conditioned mind. I failed to answer the best way possible for a question with potentially as many possible answers as there are those of us that ponder it. To answer it from my own life experience of the universe, with my personal answer, for now, that increasingly satisfies that question. Who and what am I? Well, this from Alan Watts. Through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself. Through our ears, the universe is listening to its harmonies. We are the witnesses through which the universe becomes conscious of its glory, of its magnificence. And Eckhart Tolle said, "You are not in the universe, you are the universe, an intrinsic part of it. Ultimately, you are not a person, but a focal point where the universe is becoming conscious of itself." What an amazing miracle. So I'll try to be as concise as I can. So I believe that I am a product, a reflection of a universe that's characterized by impermanence, interconnectedness, and interdependentness. I am a sentient being existing in the relationship between me and all beings and phenomena. And like all beings and things, I rise spiritually and energetically from the universal soup very briefly. And as a result of the independent aliveness of absolutely everything else, all of the causes and conditions on the grandest of scales that have led to me now. And my yogi likes to say that matter is energy cooled down. That's a thought. Wisdom suggests that the actual nature of sentient beings, our true essence, is hidden from us by the limitations of our senses and obscured by clouds of delusion, formed in large part by our conditioned responses to that which rises in our experience. In a Zoom talk a few months ago, author, mindfulness teacher, lawyer, and racial justice leader Rhonda McGee said that we are all one family who've forgotten who we are. For me, that's one of the reasons that the present moment is a sacred space. Mindfulness practice in daily life is how I get to live in that space. And occasionally, joyfully enjoy a glimpse of what is primordial and actual. So that's my answer. In this session, entitled The Wise Heart, we begin to explore what's often called heartfulness. In the insight meditation tradition, typically there are 4 domains of heart practice that coincide with what Buddhism calls the 4 immeasurables. You may hear them also referred to as the 4 divine abodes or the 4 Brahma Viharas. They are a series of 4 virtues or sublime and noble attitudes towards all beings. They're often listed as loving kindness, or in Sanskrit, metta, compassion, or karuna, joy, or mudita, more accurately perhaps translated as sympathetic joy, and equanimity, or upekkha. And I'll talk briefly about loving kindness, compassion, and equanimity, and lead us in a practice that spans these 3. The discussion of joy is seriously meant for a future fuller session, which I might offer sometime a bit later. I'll talk a little out of order by starting with compassion and speaking most about compassion amongst the mindfulness domains of the heart, our heartfulness. In the insight tradition and its spin-offs, mindfulness is increasingly becoming synonymous with compassion. for reasons you'll understand with further study if you're so inclined. But in this moment, I wanted to begin with the Pali word bodhicitta. It's a complex and layered concept that signals the awakening of heart-mind, the intention to awaken to life in order to help others awaken to life. Compassion is a stepping stone to bodhicitta. The Dalai Lama, when he was in DC some years back, said, "I don't know why people like me so much." And then he said, "Well, it must be because I care about bodhicitta. I can't claim to practice it all the time, but I care about it." And I love the way he put that the important thing is that we care about caring. We know our hearts aren't always wide and wide open and tender. We're often caught in all sorts of more small-minded places, right? But something in us cares about caring, and we value it because in the moments that we're caring, we probably feel most at home with who we sense we really are. We feel most at home in ourselves, and also most at home and connected with others. A story I love that one of my teachers tells about this woman who describes how this old, tired-looking dog, well fed with a collar but no tags, comes into her yard, walks into her house, down the hall, into the living room, lies down on the couch, and falls asleep. She said she doesn't mind. He seems like a nice dog. Her dogs don't mind, so she lets the dog nap. About an hour later, he gets up. She lets him out. Fine. Next day, he comes back, and the same thing happens. Uh, he walks into the living room, comes onto the couch, lies down, sleeps for an hour, and leaves. Well, when it happened on the third day, she put a note on his collar, and it said, "Every afternoon, your dog comes to my house for a nap. I don't mind, but I want to make sure it's okay with you." Sure enough, next day, the dog arrives again, a different note pinned to his collar. And it says, "He lives in a home with 3 children. He's trying to catch up with his sleep. Mind if I come along the next time?" So there's a sense that we love when there's this belonging and shared understanding of what it's like to be on this planet in these bodies. Compassion literally means to suffer together. It's the feeling that arises when we encounter suffering and we feel motivation to relieve it. Empathy, which is a precursor, refers to our ability to take the perspective of another, to feel the emotions another is experiencing. It morphs into compassion when that experience includes the desire to help. Now, altruism is a selfless behavior, and it's often prompted by compassion, but not always. These might be some distinctions that are useful in conversations around compassion. And then, of course, mindfulness is that non-judging awareness that's always present to some degree. In the research, trait mindfulness is measured as a significant factor in well-being as a human experiential outcome. State mindfulness is measured in the moment. And when it's cultivated through practice on the cushion and in daily life, experienced intentionally in its most fullness, it gives rise to trait compassion. It's that noticing and sensitivity that invites us to feel the sense of what another's feeling and care and want to respond. Now, research is emerging over these last years about a biological basis of compassion. It's revealed as a key adaptive strategy in our human evolution, in that it enables us to rise above self-interest and really sense a belonging to the whole net of life. So waking up in an evolutionary sense is a real game changer. And in our bodies, when we feel good, it's often an evolutionary strategy to prompt us to continue in a certain direction. And the arising of compassion feels good. When we act out of compassion, it feels good. The areas of the prefrontal cortex that correspond to interpersonal relations fire up, and oxytocin, the bonding hormone, flows. The pleasure centers light up. We're being encouraged by evolution to keep evolving in the direction of compassion. And compassion can be cultivated through practice. We can pay attention in ways that cultivate it. And then, in a deep way, it leads to a shift in felt identity from that separateness to belonging to the web of life. As the Dalai Lama put it, compassion is the seed of inner peace, and we all have the same potential. In you lies the hope for creating a better future for the world. And just as the evolutionary direction is to evolve compassion, there are pulls from our evolutionary past that create blocks that prevent easy access to the experience of compassion. For example, unmet needs for safety, satisfaction, for feeling connected. If there are unmet needs, we can regress. It's said we get hijacked by the limbic system, that part of the brain involved in our behavioral and emotional responses. Behaviors we need for survival, feeding, reproduction, caring for our young, and fight or flight responses. One of Einstein's famous quotes refers to an optical delusion of our separateness from others that restricts our affections. When we are in limbic hijack, our separateness is reinforced to the extent that people around us become unreal others. The unreal other, then, is an object that can bring us more pleasure and satisfaction, recognition. It can give us something, or one that's going to cause us suffering. It can be dangerous and demanding, unreal others. Or the other isn't so relevant, in which case we just barely pay attention at all to them. So there's a story of a man sitting at home, and he hears a knock on the door, and he opens the door, and he sees a snail on the porch. It's a little snail. So he picks up the snail, and he throws it as far as he can. 3 years later, there's a knock on the door. He opens. It's the same snail. And the snail says, well, what the heck was that all about? So there's a sense, again, with unreal other, that we're either going to push it away because it's a threat, or we're going to want to grasp onto it because it's giving us something, or we just don't pay attention. There's a story I love about a Sikh master who gives his two most devoted disciples each a chicken. And he says, go to where no one can see and kill the chicken. And so one goes behind the shed and he chops off the chicken's head with an axe. The other wanders around for hours and returns with the chicken alive. And the master said, well, what happened? And the response from the guy with the live chicken was, I can't find a place to kill the chicken where no one can see me. Everywhere I go, the chicken sees. So really, the cultivation of compassion is cultivating a sense of the realness of each other. That when we look, we're able to wake up out of all the projections and stories originating from our limbic, threatened, or craving brain and sense who's there. And when we witness this in our personal lives, we shouldn't condemn the fact that we get caught in this trance of the unreal other, but get to notice when we're stressed what happens in our relationships. Mindfulness. I can notice in myself when I'm busy and I have an agenda and there's anxiety about getting things done, and I'm really caught up in that mindset of busy person who has to accomplish this and this and this. And then I find myself in contact with someone who's having a hard time. And I can sound really compassionate. And inside, it's like some part of me is going through the motions. And I'm just not there at all. And I know that. And I don't feel good about it. And so what we start noticing is not only that we're cut off, but we don't get rewards from the evolutionary pleasure centers that we get when we're aligned with ourselves, with our missions. We don't feel good. It happens when we're grasping after something, and it happens when we're avoiding. One of the classic research studies that you might be familiar with, of course, is the Good Samaritan study that was done at Princeton, where the seminarians were given a practice sermon, and half of them were assigned the story of the Good Samaritan, and the other half a random Bible story. And then they're supposed to go to another building and give the sermon and be evaluated. But on the way to the other building, they pass a person in the doorway who's moaning in distress, a plant. So the big question is, do they stop and help? And it seems like that was determined by how much time they thought they had before giving their sermon. And if they believed that they'd be late, they didn't stop to help. And this is true even if they're on their way to give a sermon about the Good Samaritan. And I just think it's one of the most brilliant and revealing pieces of research, because we can care about caring, but when we're in the grip of there's not enough time, how many of you know that feeling? There's not enough time. Okay. It's one of the most heinous filters or beliefs that we live with, that there's not enough time. And then something terrible is surely to go wrong very soon. We live with it in so many of our moments. We don't even experience how much others become unreal. It's like when you're in crazy traffic. You know, there's 66 around us. I'm not sure if you have something similar, if you're not in this area. You know, crazy traffic. And you know, everyone else is the traffic. It's not you. You're not the traffic, are you? And I want to note that for the past 2 or 3 decades, there's been this large field of contemplative psychology and contemplative neuroscience that's been studying mindfulness, as you know, over 5,000 peer-reviewed papers and empirical studies. And the field is shifting now, and I'm glad about that. The research is leaning more into compassion. So we're talking about something that the culture needs, and then it's now being mirrored in the research. Even Darwin, if you read closely in Darwin, yes, you know, there's this kind of survival of the fittest part, but much of Darwin's writing also talks about cooperation and care between members of species. And he uses the word compassion. He talks about all beings. It's kind of an extraordinary thing that part of Darwin got shortchanged in our education, but it's there in the science, as well as in the heart of human culture. When love meets pain in the four divine abodes, or what are also called the four capacities of the awakened heart, of love, compassion, joy, and equanimity that we're talking about, when love meets pain, it turns to compassion. It's a different state. It's not just, may you be happy, but it's that shared quivering of the heart that says, oh yes, this is the tenderness that we share in our humanity. This from Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. When you awaken your heart, you find to your surprise that your heart is empty. You find you're looking into space. Who are you? Where are you? What is your heart? If you really look, you don't find anything tangible and solid. If you search for the awakened heart, if you put your hand through your rib cage and feel for it, there's nothing but tenderness. You feel sore and soft. And if you don't open your eyes to the rest of the world, you feel tremendous sadness. This sadness doesn't come from being mistreated. You don't feel sad because someone has insulted you or because you feel impoverished. Rather, this experience of sadness is unconditional. It occurs because your heart is completely open and exposed, like pure raw meat. Even if a mosquito lands on you, you feel so touched. And yet, it is this tender heart of a warrior that has the power to heal the world. That tenderness grows. And the knowing that you can do this, that this is possible. And not only is it possible, but there's a beauty to it, and there's a dignity and a nobility that this is a capacity that was born into you. Again, from Thich Nhat Hanh, he said, "Since I was a young man, I've tried to understand the nature of compassion. But what little compassion I've learned has not come from that form of understanding, but simply from my actual experience of suffering." So it's not that it's something wrong with life, it's part of who we are. I think about the biblical story of Job and the poetic answer from the voice, from the whirlwind, when Job was saying, "Why did this happen? How could there be so much suffering? And how could so much happen to me?" And the voice says, "Where were you when I clothed the sky, when I placed the suns in their orbits? Were you there when I laid the foundation of the earth, when I set the morning stars to sing together in the sky, when I set the sea with doors to hold it as it gushed forth out of the womb of darkness, when I swaddled the earth in clouds? Do you know the seasons of the wild ass as she brings forth her young, and the day the falcon learns to fly? Who are you to ask how this life should be?" And there's just something so tender about life itself. And we'll have our own measure of suffering. Everybody will. And so the question is, how do we carry it? And how do we care? And how do we tend for one another? So we go to equanimity. It's one of the four sublime attitudes, and it's considered neither a thought nor an emotion. We're talking about upekkha, in Sanskrit, upeksa. It's rather the steady conscious realization of reality's transience. It is the ground for wisdom and freedom and the protector of compassion and love. There are some very important misunderstandings about equanimity, and in Buddhism, they're called the near enemies. One of the near enemies is indifference. It masquerades as equanimity. Well, who cares about big things, But that's just a withdrawal or a kind of unwise detachment, which I used as a young boy because my family life was sort of painful, and I became a bit detached from things as a teenager, and it wasn't very healthy. I wasn't able to feel the fear or the pain very much. I just kind of withdrew from it all. Okay, I'm above it all. And it all came out later, sorry to say, but indifference is not equanimity. It's actually based on fear and shutting down. And withdrawal is not based on equanimity. It's based on forming a shell or a separation. True equanimity is the capacity to be spacious and loving and peaceful as all things arise and pass. People are afraid that if they become peaceful, they become passive, or that in equanimity they will lose control, or they're unfamiliar with this weird state. They're just sitting there, Not much is going on in my meditation. So you're talking to them. Maybe close your eyes, sense what's going on. And they'll say, I can't tell what it is. Okay. But so not much is going on. Oh, what is this weird thing? Uh, Contentment. Gosh, I've never even named that before. Contentment is not what our culture sells. Now, equanimity has different dimensions to it. It has vastness to it, or space. The traditional image, when you put salt in a cup of water and drink it, the water is really salty, but that same spoon of salt in a pond, and the pond remains clear and refreshing. You make the mind spacious and vast. It's up to you. There's a timelessness to it as well. It releases us from the bondage of time. Aldous Huxley says, an idolatrous religion is one in which time is substituted for eternity. The idea of endless progress is the devil's work, demanding sacrifice on an enormous scale, where we're always looking to the future and we don't have a sense that we already rest in timeless eternal. There's only this moment, this is it. And it's not out there, it's here. We can make progress. We can do beautiful things. But we can do them from a place of peace in ourself, of appreciation of the forests and the trees and the children and one another and the care for this human realm. Equanimity has ease in it. The Taoists call it easy come, easy go. So some children were playing by a river. They made castles of sand, and each child defended his castle from the invading hordes. And he said, "This one is mine." And they kept their castles separate. You might have noticed this. Wouldn't allow for any mistakes about whose thing is whose thing. And when the castles were finished, sometimes they had battles, and one child kicked over another, and another owner of their castle flew up in anger. He spoiled my castle, and they all got into conflict. It was, it's just like real life. And then their mothers called. It was getting dark, evening, and they all had to go home. And no one cared what happened to their castle anymore. One child would stamp on his, and the other pushed his over with his hands, and then they turned away, and each went back to their home. It's a little description of some part of our human world here. But instead of experiencing conflict, it's possible to disentangle, to rest in ease, to find a way to say things are created and they disappear. Companies, adventures, whole civilizations. I mean, think about it. Remember Y2K? The year 2000, it was a big deal. Where is it now? It's back with the pyramids and the dinosaurs and the early Homo sapiens riding the dinosaurs. That's a joke. Everything appears and vanishes. Your childhood, where is it? I mean, it's impacted you. Mine impacted me. I know that. But it's actually gone in most cases, right? And with equanimity, you start to see sometimes it's called with the eyes of a sage, with naive eyes. You rest and you see, isn't this an amazing dance? And there's such a great depth to it. Now, loving kindness. In Pali, it's metta, means benevolence, friendliness, amity, goodwill, an active interest in others. Here's a story from Richard Seltzer, who's a surgeon at Yale University. It's called The Kiss. I stand by the bed where a young woman lies, her face post-operative, her mouth twisted in palsy, clownish. A tiny twig of the facial nerve, the one to the muscles of her mouth, has been severed. She will be thus from now on. The surgeon had followed with religious fervor the curve of her flesh. Nevertheless, to remove the tumor in her cheek, I had to cut the little nerve, he says. Her young husband is in the room. He stands on the opposite side of the bed, and together they dwell in the evening lamplight. Who are they, I ask. They gaze at each other and touch one another so generously. The woman speaks. Will my mouth always be like this? She asks. Yes, I say, it will. It's because the nerve was cut. She nods a silent yes. But the young man smiles. I like it, he says. It's kind of cute. And all at once I know who he is. And unaware of my presence, I lower my gaze, for one is not bold in an encounter with the gods. And then he bends to kiss her crooked mouth. And I, so close, I can see how he twists his own lips to accommodate to hers, to show her that their kiss still works. And I remember that the gods appeared in ancient Greece as mortals. And I hold my breath and let the wonder in. So there's something about the loving heart that can take the measure of tears and sorrows that make up a human life and the beauty that make up our human life and meet it in a way that's very different than any other way we would approach it. Loving kindness is a practice. And so, as it says in the teachings, just as water drops on a stone and gradually wears it away, or just as the raindrops accumulate in a water jar, so too, drop by drop, the practice of love begins to bring the heart to flower. So, as a practice, loving kindness meditation, or metta, is something that we can train to do. And if you've done it before, at times, it can feel mechanical. And at times, it can bring up its opposite. It's not easy. Sometimes it just seems repetitive, mechanical, maybe dry, numb, not much happening. And it seems impossible sometimes, especially when grief is present, or self-judgment, shame, the feeling of imperfection, or fear, or like most early mindfulness work and life, expectations. But the practice itself is to include all, whatever arises, that too. We get to note this is dry, this is numb, this is grief, these are expectations. May I love this as well. What we're really doing in loving kindness practice is planting seeds. One more story before we get a break. There's a story of a rabbi who used to teach, he said, in the Jewish mystical tradition. And his disciples, he taught his disciples to memorize, reflect, and contemplate. And he told them to place the teachings of the holy words on their heart. So one day, a particularly bright student asked the rabbi why he always used the phrase, on your heart. And the master replied, only the divine can put the teachings into your heart. Here we recite and learn and put them on the heart, hoping that sometime when your heart breaks, they will fall in. So let's take 3 minutes for self-care, because I'm running you kind of late. I'm sorry. And we'll see you back here in a few. So I'll introduce practices for compassion, equanimity, and loving kindness somewhat more quickly than the meditations should be. Um, so if you were looking forward to a little more guided meditation in this session, I'm sorry, the instructions are here, and we're getting a lot done. And we're going to do them one after another in a bunch. Certainly not the usual practice either. So to cultivate compassion, you let yourself sit in a centered and quiet way. In this traditional form of a practice, you will combine a repeated inner intention with a visualization and the evocation of the feeling of compassion. As you first sit, breathe softly and feel your body, your heartbeat, the life within you. Feel how you treasure your own life and how you guard yourself in the face of your sorrows. Then after some time, you bring the mind to someone close to you who you dearly love and picture them and feel your natural caring for them. Notice how you hold them in your heart. Then let yourself be aware of their measure of sorrows, their suffering in life. Feel how your heart opens to wish them well, to extend comfort, to share in their pain, and to meet it with compassion. So this is the natural response of the heart. And then you would inwardly recite the phrases. May you be held in compassion. May your pain and sorrow be eased. May your heart be at peace. And you continually reciting all the while you're holding them in your heart. You can modify these phrases any way that makes them true to your heart's intention. And after a few minutes, imagine that they turn their compassionate gaze back to you and acknowledge the measure of sorrows that you carry. They say to you with tenderness the same phrases. May you be held in compassion. May your pain and sorrow be eased. May you be at peace. And you take in these compassionate wishes and let them touch your heart. After a time receiving their care, direct the same compassion to yourself. May I be held in compassion. May my pain and sorrow be eased. May I be at peace. And following this, you begin to extend compassion to others you know. Picture loved ones one after another. Hold the image of each in your heart. Be aware of their difficulties and wish them well with the same phrases or phrases that work. Then you can open your compassion further, a step at a time, to the suffering of your friends, to your neighbors, to your community, to all who suffer, to difficult people, to your enemies, and finally to the brotherhood and sisterhood of all beings. Sense your tender-hearted connection with all life and its creatures. So work with compassion practice intuitively. At times it may feel difficult, as though we might be overwhelmed by the pain. Remember, we're not trying to fix the pain of the world, only to meet it with a compassionate heart. Relax and be gentle and breathe. And let your heart and breath rest naturally as the center of compassion in the midst of the world. To cultivate equanimity, sit in a comfortable position with your eyes closed and bring a soft attention to your breath until your body and mind are calm. Then begin by reflecting on the benefit of a mind that has balance and equanimity. Sense what a gift it can be to bring a peaceful heart to the world around you. Let yourself feel an inner sense of balance and ease. Then begin repeating such phrases as, may I be balanced and at peace. Acknowledge that all created things arise and pass away. Joys, sorrows, pleasant events, people, buildings, animals, nations, whole civilizations. Let yourself rest in the midst of all of them. And add the phrases, may I learn to see the arising of and passing of all nature with equanimity and balance. May I be open and balanced and peaceful. Acknowledging that all beings are heirs to their own actions and that their lives arise and pass away according to conditions and deeds created by them. While we love and care for others, we can't fix them nor love for them. To find equanimity with others, you can add the phrase, your happiness and suffering depend on your thoughts and actions and not my wishes for you. In the next steps, you can wish peace and equanimity for specific people you know, and then to those beyond, individually or in groups. Wishing, may you learn to see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity and balance. May you have true equanimity. May you be balanced and peaceful. May you live with a peaceful heart. Finally, you can expand your field of equanimity to the whole world. May I bring compassion and equanimity to the events of the world. May I find balance, equanimity, and peace amidst it all. May I learn to see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity and balance. May I be open and balanced and peaceful. May I live with a peaceful heart. Walt Whitman wrote, I am larger than I thought. I did not know I held so much goodness. So we begin the practice of loving kindness meditation simply. Many of us are familiar with metta practices, and in a way, the compassion practices and equanimity practices sound similar. So it's best to begin by directing loving kindness to those you love rather than the self, because often people can find it difficult to direct love to themselves. Picture, imagine, think of someone you love a lot, where love comes easily and it's uncomplicated. And start where it's easy to first open the heart. You can even begin with a child or maybe a dog. So you breathe gently and recite inwardly the following traditional phrases directed toward their well-being. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be safe from inner and outer dangers. May you be well in body and mind. May you be at ease and happy. As you repeat these phrases, hold this loved one in loving kindness. Adjust the words and images to best open your heart. Repeat the phrases and kind intentions over and over again, letting them permeate your body and your mind. As I mentioned, this meditation can feel mechanical or awkward. It can also bring up feelings of irritation or anger. And if that happens, it's especially important to be patient and kind towards yourself, allowing whatever arises to be held in a spirit of friendliness and kind affection. So then after a few minutes, picture a second person about whom love comes easily. Extend the same wishes of loving kindness to them. Whether the image or feelings are clear or not, it doesn't matter. Simply continue to plant the seeds of loving wishes, repeating the phrases gently, no matter what arises. The rule in loving kindness practice is to follow the way that most easily opens your heart. Now, after a time, you're ready to turn loving kindness to yourself. Envision or imagine these other loved ones gazing back at you with the same well-wishing. They want you too to be held in kindness, to be safe and well, to be happy. So picture that. Picture them saying this to you kindly. May you too be filled with loving kindness. May you be safe from inner and outer dangers. May you be well in body and mind. May you be at ease and happy. And receive these gratefully. After a few repetitions, take their good wishes into yourself, and you may even wish to place a hand on your heart, and then recite, may I be filled with loving kindness. May I be safe from inner and outer dangers. May I be well in body and mind. May I be at ease and happy. So when you've established a sense of loving kindness for yourself, you can expand your meditation to include others. You could choose a benefactor, someone in your life who has loved or cared for you, and picture this person and carefully recite the same phrases. Then you can gradually include other people that you care about in your meditation. Picture each beloved person, recite the same phrases, evoking a sense of loving kindness for each person in turn. After this, you can include a wider circle of friends and then gradually extend your meditation step by step to picture and include community members, neighbors, people everywhere, animals, all beings, the whole earth and beyond. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be safe from inner and outer dangers. May you be at ease and happy. These are the standard phrases. Again, you can augment those as you wish to suit the direction of your loving kindness and the purposes of your practice. So, one last quote. This from Martin Luther King, where he says, "Never succumb to the temptation of becoming bitter. As you press for justice, be sure to move with dignity and discipline, using only the power and the weapons of love." It's amazing how he used that word, the weapons of love, that he would dare to do that. But, he was in a battle in some way, and the battle was really the battle of shifting from the separation that is so untrue and the cause of so much sorrow, to opening the minds and hearts of the world to use only the power of love. And so you sense that possibility.